let's talk about The Phoenix Has Landed.
Okay.
What's that about? That's a new book that has?
Well, no, that's the introduction. Basically, the Phoenix Program book came out in 1990, and at that time it got a very negative review in the New York Times because I said in the book that the Phoenix Program would not have been possible without the complicity of the New York Times and all the reporters in Vietnam helping to keep it secret. Because when I was doing the interviews with all these CIA guys over that period of 4 years, all of them kept telling me that all the reporters and the correspondents in Vietnam all knew what was going on. But at the request of the CIA, they did not talk about the CIA programs and what was really going on, which means that basically without the media, without the reporters keeping the CIA's secrets, none of this stuff would be possible. So it's like a brotherhood. And it's still that way today, nowadays. You're never gonna read in the papers or see on TV what the CIA is doing, but the media knows everything that it's doing. And it has reporters on the scene, and these reporters are watching them do what they do, and they know who they are, and they just don't report about it. And so the media was very mad at me. They were, the New York Times in particular, because I had singled them out, was very angry at me for revealing the CIA's secrets and then saying in the book that these things never would have been secret if the New York Times was really doing its job and really cared about democracy and about letting people know what the government was doing. So the New York Times got a reporter, a very famous reporter from the Vietnam War, a guy named Morley Safer, and he just slammed the book. And after that, my publisher stopped promoting, wouldn't spend a cent on public, promotion, and the book just kind of became a cult classic. It wasn't until this year that Mark Crispin Miller and Open Road revived the book and republished it as part of their Forbidden Book series. And since then, it's really gained a lot of steam, and I've been very grateful to them. But they asked me to write a new introduction, and the new introduction for the ebook is called "The Phoenix Has Landed," and that has to do with how in the 25 years since the Phoenix Program book was published, the methods that the CIA used to suppress dissent in Vietnam, those methods are now being applied in the United States against Americans by our own government. And it started after 9/11 with the Patriot Act and a lot of the harsh legislation that actually brought the CIA into conducting operations here on Americans in America itself. It was the beginning of the war on terror, and the Phoenix Program is actually the model for the war on terror. And so Mark Crispin Miller and the people at Open Road, they understood that what I had said 25 years ago was actually predicting everything that was going to be happening today with Gitmo and black sites and the application of administrative detention here in the United States, all the legal restrictions on our rights that were incorporated into the Patriot Act and which are still in force. All those things were predictable. And I did predict that they were going to happen 25 years ago, and so the people at Open Road thought that as a title for the new introduction, The Phoenix Has Landed would be appropriate for that kind of a title, because the Phoenix has come home and it has landed here, and our government is now basically waging a covert war against us using all the psychological warfare techniques that the CIA used against the Viet Cong in Vietnam. It's that serious.
What was exactly the end game in Vietnam? What was the U.S. trying to accomplish ultimately?
Well, what the CIA always wants to do is the same thing everywhere. And that is to destroy the infrastructure of a country that doesn't operate like the United States, to destroy its culture, to destroy its harmony, the connections that the people have amongst themselves and with their governments, to utterly destroy it the way Israel has utterly destroyed Gaza, the way Syria is being destroyed, the way Libya was destroyed, and to replace those cultures and those economic systems and the relationships, the way that people relate to each other, with American systems, with capitalism, with American corporations, with to tear down the local cafes and build McDonald's and Starbucks.
Yeah.
To make sure that everybody's buying Ford automobiles, and to absolutely turn those countries over to American corporations, so that American corporations can reconstruct those nations and those countries as if they were little Americas, and to profit off them, to steal all their resources, and to hand all those resources to the rich political elite, people like Pierre Omidyar and Bill Gates, who have billions and billions of dollars and just can't get enough money, and they just want more money. And those are the people that rule our country, and the CIA goes out and destroys other countries so that America can then take them over and take everything they own and set up their own little countries there. That's exactly what's going on.
What are you hoping that people, your book, The Phoenix Program, getting out, that the effect that it will have on the American public? Like, what would you like to see happen? Well,
first of all, Phoenix is my book, The Phoenix Program, is very much about the Vietnam War. So for people to read the book, you have to really want to know about the Vietnam War. And you have to want to take history seriously. We lost, that's one way of putting it. The Vietnamese did not submit. They fought. And if you read the book, The Phoenix Program, and you see how the Vietnamese fought back against the CIA and what their issues were and how determined they were against the CIA, you can learn the spirit of resistance yourself. By looking these people in the eye, these CIA really monsters who wanted to go to this very poor country and just dominate it and take it over, and yet these people were so full of a spirit of liberty and their own self-identity, and they had a spirit of sacrifice, then you can find a way to find those qualities inside yourself, and you can learn to resist what the government is doing to us here, as well as what it's doing to people overseas. But in order to learn how to resist, you have to learn what you're resisting. You have to learn the techniques that the CIA uses. You have to really understand in all its complexity what's going on around you in the world and how the powers that be are manipulating you into doing things that aren't for your own benefit. And by reading the Phoenix Program book, you can learn to you can learn this in its scope and its breadth, the complexity of the situation that we're facing, but at the same time you can learn what the simple solutions to it are. And those simple solutions, to a great extent, are the things, Kat, that you talk about on your show all the time, which is being centered in the real world, a real world where people help each other and people communicate with each other on a realistic basis about real things, and they don't fall for illusions, which Americans fall for all the time. Illusions of all sorts of things in all sorts of ways.
Could you, I mean, if possible, name maybe just like, I mean, you mentioned Starbucks and McDonald's, like what some other companies there might be that are looking to expand their reach into these lands, like.
Well, certainly, all the major corporations, and the oil. One of the big things in Vietnam was offshore oil, and all the oil companies were lining up to buy oil leases from the South Vietnamese government. There were, every kind of American product that can be sold. All those companies were looking to establish themselves in Vietnam. The irony, of course, and is that 10, 15, 20 years after the Vietnamese kicked America out, they started inviting all these companies into Vietnam anyway. And if you go to Vietnam now, they're very much interested in having normal relations with the United States, and their leaders, although in a controlled way, are inviting the companies in America that they think can be helpful to them into their country. They just didn't want it forced down their throats.
So
by bombs, by B-52s and stolen elections and things like that. So they wanted to deal with the United States on their terms. And the United States, people like Obama, Cheney, Hillary Clinton, they can never imagine in their wildest dreams not imposing their will on other people. There's no everything they do is just bullying other people into accepting their terms so that they always get the better deal.
why?
And, so that's what's happening in our own lives all the time too.
Why do you think the Vietnamese people want to invite these companies into their country when, they were, the way that they were treated and what did happen to, the civilian population there during the Vietnam War?
Well, first of all, the Vietnamese are also inviting Russian companies in and Chinese companies in.
Oh.
And they're inviting companies from India. Anybody who can help their country to develop and is to the benefit of their people, they're willing to do business with. It's not just the United States. Had the United States won the war, the Vietnamese people really wouldn't have anything to say about whether they would be, they wouldn't be allowed to invite the Russians in or the Chinese. They would just be a colony of the United States. But in a society like Vietnam, they look around and they say, well, this American company has something to offer us that the Chinese or the Russians can't, so let's invite that company in. But they're doing it on their terms.
Right.
And what I'm saying to you is that through the CIA and programs like the Phoenix program, the people who run our country never allow anybody else to have any input at all into what's going on in their own countries. They want to just dominate and completely rule those other companies and tell them what to do.
Wonderful. I wanted to ask you, by the way, I just wanted to mention that during my talk with Mark Crispin Miller, he called the Phoenix program the rule book, basically, for the CIA during the Vietnam War. And the next thing I wanted to mention was that it wasn't LBJ who was the one that faked the Gulf of Tonkin as a reason to get into the Vietnam War, that it was McNamara?
Well, about the first thing, if you understand the Phoenix program, you understand the CIA, very much so. It's certainly, you'll get a real feel for what the CIA is, and that's one of the reasons why the book was suppressed. I did interviews with CIA officers who thought that the CIA itself had given them permission to talk to me, and they were very free about everything they said to me. So they revealed lots and lots and lots of secrets about what the CIA does. And if you want to learn about the CIA, then like Mark Crispin Miller was saying, learn about the Phoenix program, and you'll learn about about how the CIA is organized and how it operates. You know, I don't know if I exactly agree about what he's saying about the Gulf of Tonkin, about what Mark's saying. My understanding is that Lyndon Johnson wanted to go to war in Vietnam, and he put the word out. He authorized a program called Op Plan 34, which was a bunch of secret attacks against North Vietnam, which were designed to provoke North Vietnam into attacking the United States. And that's one of the things that the CIA does. In secret, it provokes responses so that they can say, well, North Vietnam attacked us, or Syria has chemical weapons, or Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, and here's the evidence. Or they can say, the Palestinians attacked the Israelis.
Right.
And behind all of this, it's actually the CIA who's doing everything. But because it's secret, and because reporters won't report on it, everybody in America thinks that, well, the Palestinians attacked Israel, or Saddam has weapons of mass destruction, or the North Vietnamese attacked American ships in the Gulf of Tonkin, so now we have to bomb the living daylights out of them for 10 years. And LBJ made it quite clear to everybody, including McNamara, that he wanted a pretext to go to war against North Vietnam. The fact that McNamara and the CIA created the conditions and the specific operations that led to this, does not mean that LBJ didn't know about it. He's responsible for the whole thing. And it was it's like the king saying about Thomas, King Henry saying about Becket, who will rid me of this man? You know, I mean, and everybody knows, well, one of us has got to kill Becket, and so they do it, and then Henry says, oh my God, somebody killed Becket. That was the position that LBJ was in. And he was responsible for those attacks on North Vietnam, which led to the Gulf of Tonkin. And incidentally, I discussed that at length in the Phoenix program book.
Okay. We have just about 4 minutes left, so I wanted to maybe just spend those last few minutes. So now that the Phoenix program is being resurrected and circulated, I mean, I'm trying to like find the right words to, the way to put it, as far as like feeling, comfortable with that and, or safe with it.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, when I wrote the book, nobody knew that I was doing it. I was just, an anonymous, I didn't have a magazine behind me or a publisher behind me or a newspaper like the New York Times. I'm not an academic. I didn't have Harvard University behind me. And I went around and I talked to all these CIA guys and all these military guys, special forces people, Vietnamese, very dangerous people, the predators. And I dealt with them all for 4 years. I never felt any fear. And I encourage everybody else not to feel any fear from these people and to just try to learn about them as much as you can. The New York Times is not going to tell you what the CIA does. CNN is not going to tell you what the CIA does and what they're doing. The Times and CNN know everything that the CIA is doing right now. They know the names of the people in the CIA and what they're doing, but they're not going to tell you. So you got to kind of search it out and seek it out yourself. And the New York Times and CNN and the CIA want you to be afraid to do that. There's no reason for you to be afraid. You got to just go out and do it.
It's more scary to not do it.
Oh, absolutely. Because, once you see these people in the flesh, you realize that it's just their minds that are diseased. They really aren't a threat to you, other than in the fact that they have organized themselves together and they have diseased minds.
We have just about a minute left. Do any of them ever express any remorse? The men that you interviewed?
Have I ever felt any remorse?
No, the men that you interviewed.
Yeah, some of them have. I've had grown men crying in front of me, sobbing about the things they did. Yeah, sure. Some of them feel remorse. And
is that in your book, the Phoenix Program, or?
Yeah, the very last chapter is discuss one individual in particular who actually has a tape up, Stan Fulcher, talks about his feelings of remorse, and a couple of people in the book talk about it as well.